Good morning, students. In this video, we are going to discuss about eukaryotic cells from the chapter Cell, the Unit of Life. Okay, now let's see some introduction regarding eukaryotic cells. The eukaryotic cells include all the protists, plants, animals, and fungi. In eukaryotic cells, there is an extensive compartmentalization of cytoplasm through the presence of membrane-bound organelles. So, in all these organisms, protists, plants and animals and fungi, we can able to see compartmentalization cytoplasm and as well as well-defined membrane-bound cell organelles can be seen. What are those? Along with the nucleus, mitochondria, chloroplast, endoplasmic reticulum, lysosomes, Golgi complex, etc. All these cell organelles can be seen in eukaryotic cells, right? And eukaryotic cells possesses an organized nucleus with the nuclear envelope. And in addition to that, eukaryotic cells have a variety of complex locomotory and skeletal organs, and as usual their genetic material is organized into chromosomes. So those chromosomes contains DNA. Understand? So now some more information regarding eukaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells are not identical in the nature. Plants and animals are different from one to another because on the screen you can able to see animal cell structure. A thin membrane on the surface of the animal cells, it is nothing but plasma membrane. Understand? But you can able to see in these cell organelles, in this animal cell you can able to see some organelles. Centrioles. Centrioles are exclusively present in animal cells whereas they are absent in plant cells. These centrioles helps to animal cells for divide the cell into two daughter cells. Understand? Now one more important point I would like to tell you. These centrioles, when they are absent in plant cells, but plant cells are having specifically some important organelles in them. Now let us see what are those important cell organelles can be seen in the plant cells. Look at the diagram on the screen, everybody. Plant cells possesses cell wall, outer non-rigid structure, and below that plasma membrane, and plasma membrane is covering or surrounding the cytoplasm. In the cytoplasm, number of well defined or distinct membrane bound cell organelles like plastids and mitochondria, chloroplast, Golgi complex, endoplasmic reticulum, smooth and rough endoplasmic reticulum, microbodies, etc. Many cell organelles can be seen in these plant cells. But in these plant cells, one important characteristic can be differed from animal cells. What is that? Centrally, large vacuole is present in these plant cells, whereas that central large vacuole is absent in animal cells. Understand? In another hand, in animal cells, as we discussed, centrioles are present. Those centrioles are absent in plant cells. Understand? Now let us see some more detailed information regarding each and every cell organelle in the prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. In prokaryotic cells and in eukaryotic cells, the common membrane on the surface of the cell is nothing but cell membrane. Understand? And that cell membrane structure we are going to discuss in detail in this video. Look at the diagram, everybody. So here there is a 3D dimensional cell membrane diagram is present. Now let us see cell membrane and its structure and function in detailed under eukaryotic cells in detailed. The detailed structure of the membrane was studied only after the advent of the electron microscope in the 1950s. Understand? Meanwhile, chemical studies on the cell membrane, especially in human RBC cells, human RBC cells are also called as red blood cells or erythrocytes, right? Enable the scientists to reduce the possible structure of the plasma membrane. So, plasma membrane structure clearly explained by the scientists in 1950s with the help of electron microscope, especially in human RBC. They are well noticed some specific structures. Now let us see what are those. These studies showed that the cell membrane is composed of lipids that are arranged in bilayer. You can see the lipid bilayer in this present diagram on the screen, which is present. So one layer of the lipids are present on the surface, one layer of the lipids presents at the bottom as a layer, one more layer. So there are two layers are present up and down, since the lipid layer is called as lipid bilayer. Understand? Now one more important point. Also the lipids are arranged within the membrane with the polar heads towards the outer sides and the hydrophobic tails towards the inner part. Understand? So you can see round or spherical shaped uh, lipid molecules, which are pink and red in color in the diagram, are present. Those are nothing but lipid molecules. Each lipid molecule has two parts. One is spherical head, which is presented outer side, and the second part is tails. Those tails are showing direction or emerging towards the center portion of the cell membrane. Understand? Now location of the heads and tails in the lipid molecules as follows: heads towards the outer sides and hydrophobic tails towards the inner part of the plasma membrane. The outer sides and the another important thing, the outer sides and the hydrophobic tails towards inner side. This ensures that the non-polar tails are saturated hydrocarbons is protected from the aqueous environment. Understand? You can see in this diagram. So the space which is present between outer and inner lipid bilayer is somewhat aqueous in nature. So into that aqueous nature, who is emerging? Tails are emerging. So the lipid component of the membrane mainly consists of phosphoglycerides. So this is one of the important component in the lipid membrane. Next, one more point here. Biochemical investigation clearly revealed that the cell membrane also possesses proteins and carbohydrates. You can see proteins structure, which are dark yellow in color, and you can also see carbohydrates, nothing but in the form of glucose. Those you can see on the surface of the membrane. So next, one more important point I would like to tell you here, that the ratio of proteins and lipids varies considerably in different cell types. In human beings, the number of the proteins and lipids as follows. The percentage is as follows: the membrane of the erythrocyte has approximately 52% of protein and 40% of lipids. Understand? Depending on the ease of extraction and attraction, membrane proteins can be classified into two categories. The first one is integral protein and second one is peripheral protein. You can see on the diagram integral proteins and peripheral proteins. So the peripheral proteins are blue in color on the screen in this diagram. Then integral proteins. The integral proteins are also called as channel proteins, which are blue in color, present in the present in the middle, both upper lipid layer and lower lipid layer. Next, one more important point. These ratios are, as I just mentioned, 52% of proteins, 40% of lipids, and 8% of sugars. These are the three components which presents in the plasma membrane. Depending on the ease of attraction, Membrane proteins can be classified into integral proteins and peripheral proteins. Peripheral proteins lie on the surface of the membrane, while the integral proteins are partially or totally buried in the membrane. Understand? You can able to see that characteristic in this diagram which I am showing you on the screen right now. Peripheral proteins are completely outside and integral proteins are present between the lipid bilayer, either partially or totally buried in the membrane. Next, one more important point I would like to tell you. An improved model of the structure of the cell membrane was proposed by Singer and Nicholson in the era of 1972. 1972. Widely accepted fluid mosaic model, which is proposed by Singer and Nicholson. Just let us go to back once again to explain about one important concept. According to this, the quasi-fluid nature of lipid enables the lateral movement of proteins within the overall bilayer, and the ability to move within the membrane is measured as its fluidity. Understand, the fluid nature of the membrane is also import from the protein, and the point of view in the functions like cell growth, formation of intercellular junctions, secretion, endocytosis, and cell division, etc., are performing by the cell membrane, and it is important from the point of view of different functions based on the fluidity nature of lipid molecules. Then one of the most important functions of the plasma membrane is transportation of the molecules across it, and the membrane is selectively permeable, and it is allowing only some molecules present on either side of it. The molecules can move briefly across the membrane without any requirement of energy, and that is called as passive transportation. And either from outside to inside or inside to outside, the molecules can easily move without depending on energy. So that type of transportation is called as passive transportation. And neutral solutes may move across the membrane by the process of simple diffusion along the concentration gradient, that is from higher concentration gradient to lower concentration gradient. Understand? So this is important point for NEET examination. Please make a note. Water may also move across the membrane by a simple diffusion is called as osmosis. Understand? As the polar molecules cannot pass through the non-polar lipid bilayer, they may require a carrier protein of the membrane to facilitate their transportation across the membrane. Understand? So who is the medium here? Proteins are the mediums to transport the substances from inside to outside or outside to inside, from one concentration gradient to another concentration gradient. Movement of water by simple diffusion is called as osmosis. Right, just now we had a discussion. As the polar molecules cannot pass through the non-polar lipid bilayer, they required a carrier protein of the membrane to facilitate their transport across the membrane. A few ions or molecules are transported across the membrane against the concentration gradient, that is from lower to higher concentration gradient. When ions or molecules are moving from lower to higher concentration, certainly they require some amount of energy for transportation of ions and molecules. So when they depend upon this energy for the transportation process, then that is called as energy dependent process. So the energy dependent process is nothing but called as active transport. You can see on the diagram about active transportation. Active transportation required energy in the form of ATPs. Now again, energy also can be utilized in the form of Na plus and Ka plus ions pump. Understand? So in such a way, cell membrane performing different functions. Now, one more important point I would like to tell you: the outermost non-rigid structure of plant cells, it is nothing but called as cell wall. Understand? This plasma membrane is present commonly in both plant cells and animal cells, but cell wall is exclusively present in plant cells only, right? So as you may recall, a cell wall is a non-living rigid structure called the cell wall from outer covering of the plasma membrane of fungi and plants. The cell wall is showing one important characteristic. Cell wall is giving not only shape to the cell, and it is also helps in different functions. What are the different functions helping by the cell wall? And protecting the cell from mechanical damage and infections. Understand? It is also helps in cell to cell interaction and provides a barrier to undesirable macromolecules. And one characteristic should be noticed here: algae is a lower organism. Then what about algae characteristics regarding cell wall? Let us see in this video only. Algae have cell wall made up of with the cellulose, galactans, mannans, and minerals like calcium carbonate. But while in the plants it consists of cellulose, hemicellulose, pectins, and proteins. Right? So most of the plants are made up of with cellulose, as we discussed just now. And the cell wall is a young plant cell. It is called as primary wall. It is capable for growing, which gradually diminishes of the cell matures at the secondary wall formed by the inner towards the membrane of the cell. Then one more point, you can see in this diagram on the screen, the middle lamella is a layer mainly made up of calcium pectate, which holds or glues the different neighboring cells together. This is very very important. You can see middle lamella, the middle lamella which is present on the screen, and it is exhibiting these many different kinds of functions. Then the cell wall and middle lamella may be transversed by plasmodesmata, which connect the cytoplasm of the neighboring cells. Why? Because from one cell to another cell, if any kind of required ions or molecules are there, they can be transported very easily by the plasmodesmata. It's a cell to cell barrier. You can see plasmodesmata structure here as a bridge between the two cells. Understand? So the transportation is taking place between two neighboring cells with the help of plasmodesmata, since it is connected the two neighboring cells. Understand, students? Now with this cell wall I conclude this video. In the next video we will discuss about rest of the cell organelles in detail. Thank you one and all.